Let me just introduce my two colleagues here. We've spoken a lot today about things Cora PPM. So this next segment is actually to see the product in action and different features that might be helpful for you to know about. And so to do that, we have some expert guides with me on stage. The first gentleman right here is Yancey Joyner, who's one of our senior solution consultants in the USA. And I'm also joined by John Wilson, who's our senior consultant expert in the UK. So I'm going to give the platform over to them for the moment, so please join them both. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. First off, hello, everyone. Vincent just said that I'm part of the solutions consultant team at Cora. I think Yancey and I, fair to say, we're both quite proud to be part of that team. And I'll make you a deal today, because I know we're coming to the end of the day. As long as everyone pays attention, we will not go more than 5 minutes on each of our sections. The alternative is we all stay till about 9, 10 p.m. And Yancey and I will continue talking for about the product. No, I'm only joking. But essentially, we're here today. We're going to run through 5 feature demos. Each of them are about 5 minutes long. And of course, if anyone would like an expansion after on any of it, Yancey and I have a little demo station back there. Feel free to come and grab us. That's our job. We talk about the product, listen to challenges, etc. Okay, so first off, our first topic that I'm taking is supply chain sync to schedule. And I guess a bit of a background before we get going there, why this feature was designed, why am I talking about it? It's just really to simplify, standardize, and speed up your supply chain department. Okay, so that overall process, we're going to look how Cora can bring all that together. We spoke a lot today about the integrated master schedule. We're going to see how an ERP solution can come into play here, show our materials, show our overspend, show what materials are being late as well. So the key thing here, what we're going to show is, when we bring up the product shortly, is I want to be told by Cora where we're going to run into issues. Okay, we don't want that to happen down the line. We want to be told if our materials are late, why is that going to happen? Where is that going to happen in the process? We want to be avoiding that and stopping it before it can get too late down the line. Okay, and we mentioned the second bullet point there about the ERP. We're going to see how Cora can bring that into play as well. So before we bring up the product, I'm just going to give a kind of a quick case study there that we can use for this part of the demo. We have a project, and we have some materials arriving on site as well. So we have a contractor arriving on site, and to complete his part of the job, we need those materials to actually be there on site so the two can align. Okay, so bringing everything together under that one roof. So if we jump into the product, we're going to land straight on to our very simple Gantt chart. And I appreciate from where you're sat, a lot of this you won't be able to see very clear. But what we're going to do here is, all of you will be aware, down the left-hand side of our schedule, there are a number of logos, okay, of our project here. And a lot of these logos are giving us information or alerts. What's coming in the project, what's going on in these projects. And we're going to focus on 1 or 2 of them today. So we're going to focus on number line 35, where we've got 3 rows relating to a work package. Okay, so as a user, I'm in here, I'm being told, you can't read that, but what that's telling me, that red logo, is we have a shipment date of materials that's 3 days before the start date of our task. So immediately I'm in here, I'm being told that we have an issue. Okay, so what I can do from this, I can click on that for a bit more information, and it's going to give me a high-level summary as to what's going on in this particular task. Okay, so as a project manager, as any manager, I'm coming in here, this top-level summary bar is telling me there's an issue. On the left, we have the task in question, and on the right in red, we have a shipment date of the 14th of October. Okay, and that's red because our materials arriving on site after our start task date. Okay, so that could have a knock-on effect. For example, if Mr. Contractor is arriving on site to deliver this work, the materials are not there, he may be contracted to still be paid, So there's a financial loss there. And as a project manager, I'm being told immediately there's an issue. Now, we're not going to do it, but I could come in here and I could change the start date of this task. I could solve the issue with a couple of clicks. Mr. Contractor's not going to run into any issues there. So that's just one use case there. Now, if we minimize that view for just a moment, there is one more icon on our schedule of work here. This one here, this is relating to the materials in question. So if we open that one up, and if we refer back to the slide from earlier on, when we're perhaps bringing in data from an ERP, these are the actual materials in question now. So if I'd like to, great, earlier on we saw that we have an issue, we saw all the dates. Here, these are the materials in question. So we've got 2 fuses arriving on site for this task. I can see the account code that they're linked to. Further on the right-hand side, I can see when they're shipped. I can see the quantity of them. I can see the cost of them. Maybe we want to bring in an external cost. We want to mark up that cost before we share that with Mr. Supplier. All of these fields are coming in from the ERP. Okay, so again, what we can do here is get quite clever. We can set a threshold. So we need the work to start. We need 300 fuses in this example. So we can set a threshold where maybe we would like 10, 20% of our materials on site before we want the engineer to arrive and begin that work. So we can get quite clever on this screen as well. Okay, so if we collapse that view for the time being, I appreciate what I've showed you so far is more of an in-task view of my materials. Okay, so a new feature that we showed today is the ability to, we're in our project here, we've created quite a simple one. Yancey's clicked on that linked materials button. So now I'm looking at materials from a project down perspective. I've got 2 time periods here, and I've got a number of rows associated to them. This is simply letting me know how many of my materials are coming in from my ERP for my project that have not been linked to a task on my project. Okay, so I could be in here. If you could expand that for me, Yancey, one of those, perhaps the 15 or the 2 there. Click on the number 15 for me. Excellent. What you'll see here is all the materials that have been not assigned to a particular task. And if we expand that out, we could come and check them. These are the materials that haven't been allocated to a task, and we can simply check them and assign them to tasks. Okay, so if we close that down, and if we kind of navigate back to our slide deck for just a quick summary there before moving on to the second session. Highlight there really is, as an end user, I'm in the product. I'm being told from the very beginning that there was an issue. And I can come into Cora, I can remove that issue early on, therefore saving any cost, any misalignment, any resources or time that's been wasted in that process. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second of 5 short demos there. We're going to move on to the resource demand here. And in this part, next 5 minutes, you're going to see a few things. We're going to be talking about how maybe we can resource for an individual task. So we're going to be talking about the demand. But we're also going to see some new and improved UI that Adele and the team were talking about earlier on. So there's a mixture of new functionality and then also some new UI there as well. And the guest speakers earlier on, they were talking a lot about the need to be flexible when customers are resourcing. Hopefully what you'll see today is an improved view of that. No customer resources the same way. And Adele was referring to attributes, custom attributes when we're resourcing. We're going to have a look at a bit of that as well. So no longer is it the norm to purely resource by a skill. Maybe I want a solutions consultant. I want them based in the UK. And when I'm resourcing for them, they need to be security cleared, and they also need to have a qualification of X. So we're talking about these attributes are linked to a person, and when we resource shortly, we're going to see some of that as well. And then finally, there's a resource distribution curve mentioned there. So there may be situations where when I allocate my resource, Perhaps I want them front-loaded. Perhaps I want all their effort jam-packed in more of a back-loaded approach where maybe the revenue is coming in for our project at the end. So we actually want our resources more pumped out at the end of the project. So we're going to be looking at that as well. So we jump back into the product. And again, the next screen, we're going to keep it very straightforward to begin with, because appreciate the screen is not going to show everything from where you're sat. And we're going to navigate to the skill demand, a very stripped-back version of the schedule of work here. And very simply, I'm going to identify task 3. I'm going to jump in, I'm going to edit that task because I want a resource for it. And this is the piece I wanted to pause on here. So users of Cora, you will be familiar with resourcing in Cora. And previously, you'd have to go to 2 places to resource for a task. To resource for a user, a skill, a material. This page, this modal on the right-hand side is new. There's new functionality. Everything's in the one place. Okay, so quite simply, I'm in this screen. We've allocated a project manager for demo purposes today. Yancey can click on that for me. What that's going to do is bring up a screen where I can begin to resource for my project manager, and I can begin to use some of those custom attributes that we were talking about earlier on. So just as a quick guidance here, just to mention what we're seeing. We need a project manager for 200 days. We can see the account codes come in by default. And on the right-hand side, when we begin to resource for this project manager, we can start to pull in some of these custom attributes, such as security clearance. I need them in the UK. I need them to have a qualification of X. So certainly not limited to these custom attributes. The word custom should explain that you can have different unique qualifications or attributes that may be relevant to your organizations there. Okay, so very flexible. And if I was to come in here, we're not going to go through all the tabs today, but you'll notice if I click Edit on this page towards the top left here, I could come in here, and I spoke about distribution curves earlier on. I want to allocate my project manager evenly in my example today. I'm going to choose a custom distribution curve. But the reason I wanted to bring up this page here is because I may want to front load or back load my resource. So it's given me a lot more flexibility when it comes to resourcing. Okay, so I can come in here, I can choose that. Of course, we can expand on that later on, but for now, I'm happy with that. I want to actually choose a custom distribution today. It's unique to my organization. I want to come in here, and now I'm looking at the time frame of my project manager, how I want them to be distributed across this task. Okay, and I'm going to ask Yancey, I'm going to remove any time from April, and I'm going to stick that extra 20 hours in June for whatever reason. Again, it's a custom distribution curve here. Excellent, thank you, Yancey. If I save that, we're going to keep the example nice and safe, nice and straightforward. And if I come out of that now, and I jump into the resource demand page, which again, those of you familiar should see an improvement in the UI on this page. And what we're going to see here, resource allocation, this is a top-down view of my project. All of the skills that have been demanded for my project. We're going to look at a more complete one shortly, but I wanted to keep this one up because this is our project manager. We can see the skill. About 2, maybe 10 seconds ago, we created that custom curve where we removed time from April and we put it into June. So you can see straight away, April is empty. And if you move the mouse down a tiny bit there, so you can see June, our work has ramped up. It's 1.82. So our curve has gone up, the work has ramped up in June, and then the curve has gone down for the rest of the year. Okay, so brand new screen, new UI, and you'll see some drop-down boxes at the top, yeah? So customers will need to resource in different ways. So this is letting me filter on, show me just the resource where the demand has been met, show me the resource where it hasn't, and of course customers will need to resource using different measurements as well, days, FTE, hours. Now, I wanted to navigate to a more complete screen, and Yancey will do that for me, just to give you an idea of how a project may look with multiple resources going on the page. Okay, so here we've got multiple skills going down. We can see some of that demand has been met already in green. And a good example here is, I'll pick on, we spoke about attributes, custom attributes, okay? And if we expand engineer here, we can see Louise has been allocated to this task. And a good example that happened actually yesterday on the golf course, Suzanne, the head of marketing at Cora, she was recruiting or resourcing for customer golf and Cora golf. And what she could have done, if she had custom attributes available to her, is come to this page. She could have filtered out all the golfers who had a handicap of under 20. She could have filtered out the golfers who language is terrible on the course, lose 20 golf balls around. And if she did that, she would have filtered out me very quickly. And Oisin, Kevin, a lot of you around today playing golf yesterday, you would have enjoyed a much more efficient round of golf without myself there. So, but anyway, coming back to our slide deck there, Yancey, for a moment, just to repeat the resource demand there. New UI, curves being brought into play, but I think perhaps the most powerful piece is the custom attributes, where it's going to allow that flexibility. It's going to allow that advanced filtering to really home in on who the best resource is for that project. Now I'm just going to tag Yancey in for our next section there. And I'll be back shortly. Thank you, Yancey.
Absolutely. So I'm going to cover schedule enhancements today, and nothing excites a room like status date conversation and additional start dates and finish dates, and we're going to cover that. And I think there's some items that are going to be, I think, very relevant to the project and program managers and scheduling, and just adding to adoption and schedule integrity and the overall reporting that you're going to see. So we're going to define and talk about our new status date. I'm going to show you some additional calculated fields that are going to be visible in the Gantt right away, and they're going to add value, and they're going to be tied into that status date as well. Show you some highlighted icons that are going to help you identify when your status date might come into play and when it might be time to execute that, and talk about the ability to take this functionality even at a program level and then push it down to projects within that program. So being able to do some top-down execution on that. I will say for these, I do want to, so who's the target audience for schedule enhancements? As you might imagine, the project manager, the program manager, that person that's doing project scheduling, and we're looking to improve adoption, and we're looking to improve schedule integrity around those dates to ultimately facilitating reporting that you pull out of the system. So, John, if you'll pull up, Cora will get into and give a couple of examples here with some projects that are going to be a good conversation piece going forward. So like John, I pulled forward a very basic Gantt chart for you to take a look at and when we begin to think about our status date. In this project plan, you'll notice I had a start date back in November, and the project is going to stretch out for a few months. And even if you notice, the first task in the project has been completed. And so think about this for a moment. One of the points in time when a project schedule has the most integrity is at the beginning of the schedule, before anything's been updated. And the integrity of that schedule sometimes begins to diminish the longer the project goes on. And in this example, we were going to kick off in November. I statused one task as being complete, but then a common use case occurs, and that is maybe I didn't receive updates from team members, and I've got some tasks that were once relevant in the beginning when this project was stellar, and now those project dates are stale. And I, as the project manager, it's pretty easy in this example to go in, manipulate 4 or 5 tasks, move this process forward and catch up. But if I'm managing dozens, if not hundreds of tasks, the concept of a status date comes into play and is really important for us. So what is the status date? Some of you might even have heard it referred to before as a data date. but it's going to allow the project manager to go in and provide a point in time to bring the schedule current and bring everything forward. So when John selects the little icon there on the menu around our status date, what I would challenge some of you to think about is how often are your project managers updating their schedules? Is it weekly, biweekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever it might be? But whatever that update cycle is, a good best practice is we take a baseline, we put in a new status date, and if John puts in a status date of just today and selects OK, you're going to notice the info bar over on the left-hand side begins to come to life, and I can see the tasks that are behind schedule. That filter can be applied, so I can really quickly zero in on the task that I'm going to manipulate during this little exercise. At scale, where there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of tasks, this becomes even more important. So I've got some tasks there that, look, they've got a start date of January and then early April. What I want to do is, if we go back, John, to that icon, I can go in and establish today's date as my new status date. That's going to bring all of those tasks that are kind of languishing in this reporting no man's land, it's going to bring them up to date and move forward. The schedule that you're looking at right now, if you think about on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the value of this schedule from a reporting standpoint? It's maybe a 4, and it's moving to a 3 quickly because the dates are just not current. This status date is going to allow me to go in, only isolate the tasks that are trending to finish late based on their start date, and bring them up to schedule. Okay? Pretty straightforward. Now, where this is going is not only are we going to have the ability to affect the start date, but let's say that you had a task that had a 90-day duration, and within 30 days you're complete. You're also going to be able to manipulate the finish date. So have the data date update the finish date, because I don't want to continue to carry that milestone out into the future thinking it's still to be done when it's actually been completed. So there's a lot of enhancements that are currently there under the status date, and that's only going to continue to move forward as we go along. Before I leave that, I will point out, so the traditional view within Cora was the start date, finish date, which in let's say basic scheduling terms would represent a plan date, plan start, plan finish. With the addition of the statusing icon, we now are giving you actual start, actual finish, and because we're doing a forward pass and a backward pass in calculating the critical path, we're calculating early start, early finish, late start, late finish. So if I'm looking at this schedule, I'm now armed with a lot more basic key functionality that I didn't have before, especially around that status date, being able to really examine the slack in my schedule to understand where I can manipulate and still adhere to key milestone and deliverable dates within the project plan. So John, if we'll go back to the PowerPoint, just a quick recap. We defined the status date. We introduced the new calculated fields that are there. We highlighted the icon on the left-hand side to let you know that a task would be impacted by the status date. And I didn't mention it, but I'll recap here. If I had so we looked at one project and 8 tasks within a project. That same concept, though, would apply at a program level, maybe with a dozen different projects, all with their own task list. So I could begin to apply the data date and bring forward all of those tasks within that program within one feature option there. So we'll move from schedule enhancements to enterprise financials. And if I think about my target audience for enterprise financials, it certainly could be our project and program manager. It could be a cost account manager. It could be whoever in your organization is establishing the initial project budget or updating that project budget, or maybe is responsible for coalescing all of that into a reporting environment related to financials. So we're going to talk about greater financial controls through the ability to tag and to take iterations of project plans. Also, the ability to have separate workflows for your budgets and your forecasts. Most people approve a budget in a different approval workflow format than they approve a forecast. They might even have different frequencies that they need approval. So having the ability to have different workflows for different financial entities there is very important. I want to show you an improved reporting widget based on some of the parameters that we have there. And then finally, on the bottom, we talked about those workflows, and you're going to see an example of that as we go through. So John, if you don't mind jumping into Cora, we can grab a project and take under our financials there. You can see, and John, if you don't mind, just briefly, just click on financials. And so what we've added there is that enterprise financials view that you'll find under financials. That's what John has selected. And in our example here, you see 5 different categories of cost information. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the cost estimate approach, that screen is pretty much intact. What you can see all the cost account codes on the left-hand side, and I can see my cost account designations. One big improvement here is, let's say that you have 3,000 cost account codes that you're managing, and each time you open a project, you see all 3,000. Well, that's not going to be the case any longer. The only time you're going to see a cost account code is if it's deployed on the project itself. So if there are only 2 appear, you're only going to see those 2. That's a big improvement, other than trying to make your way through the additional fields there. John, if you'll select the budget icon there, a couple of concepts to introduce here that are new. So when John highlights the budget standpoint, and if he selects Edit, notice on the upper right-hand side, we're going to get the ability within our budget, separate from our forecast, but within our budget, just like John did with applying curves to resources, we're going to be able to take our budgets, whether they're from materials, from facilities, from users, resources, and create curves from here as well. So those curves are going to be, and the same curve, so front load, back load, bell curve, even a custom curve code, that would be fine. You're also going to get the ability to load from schedule. I could see this being very useful if you were creating your initial budget and a PM has assigned some material cost, resource cost, and schedule. I want to pull that forward as a first iteration of my budget. I could do that. I also could load and help create my budget from my forecast. I could add additional finance codes here to edit this screen out. If you look on the bottom there where John is around iterations, I think this is the key to this whole concept. We're going to allow the project manager or the person manipulating this screen to go in and take as many iterations or snapshots of this budget or forecast as they want. They also can allow Cora to go in and take system snapshots. So these are going to act very much like baselines that you might take within your project schedule. When I look at that enterprise financials reporting widget, I'm going to be able to see and compare original budget versus baseline 1 budget versus baseline 2, whatever it might be. You get a lot more flexibility to look at those comparisons and then also to trend over time. Maybe the second most important component, maybe it's the first, it depends on the use case, but is the ability to create workflows around each one of these categories. I could have a separate workflow for budget, a separate workflow for forecast, and it answers the age-old question of who approved what when, and all of the traditional usability enhancements around workflow within Cora are there to support that concept. John, if you'll bring up the enterprise financial reporting view, I'll give you a quick look at how those iterations would come into play from this reporting standpoint. So this is a financial analysis view. You can see my actuals, my commitments, my budget, my forecast. This is a kind of a standard view within Cora. If John goes and selects the little configuration icon there, look at the 3 options, and the first one is selected. So this is the most traditional view within Cora today, so looking at the latest data. However, if I wanted to have this view based on specific iterations of the data and variances between them, so all of those different snapshots that either the system took or I took, I'm going to be able to use those as points to chart. And then if I wanted to take a look at that data is trending over time, I could look at that as well. So just some basic enhancements around how enterprise financials are also feeding the reporting model around Cora as well. And look, I think we definitely spoke about each one of these. Workflows are huge, iterations are huge. The fact that the budget now can be built from the Gantt chart interaction, I think is really important, and the concept of having workflows around those different types of financial categories are very important. Last one. So it is very apropos that everyone today has mentioned either a desire or a requirement around sharing integration between different enterprise systems within their environment. And we wanted to take one specific instance of where we've used our integration capabilities to pull data and push data with a system that many of our customers use, and that is Jira. So the overall conversation here is around the integration strategy at Cora, and we're going to use the Jira integration, I guess, as a showcase just to kind of talk through that. We're definitely looking to minimize duplication of data between different systems. And a very common use case that John and I run into is I've got a waterfall team and I've got an agile team. The agile team is using Jira and they're entering data there. I want to pull all of that into Cora from a reporting standpoint, maybe even from a budgeting and resource management standpoint, but I want to get away from entering data twice, improving reporting and allowing that Jira data to populate different components of the project entity, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So what I'm going to show you is a very common use case of using Jira, using Cora, and what the value proposition behind that is going to be. So John has logged into an environment of Jira, and we've got a new software implementation project that he's going to open. And when he opens, we're going to get a series of swim lanes with different issues and tasks. Typically, whenever we show this to a customer, you almost right away get people in the audience nodding, yes, that looks like an environment that a lot of my teams work in on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to go through, we've got new task 101. So the way this works, and John and I would be happy to walk you through a live example of this, but someone's going to go in, they enter that new issue, that new task, they define a start date, a proposed completion date, maybe even have a duration around it, whatever they might do, and save that to Jira, and that integration is going to pick that up and bring that structure into Cora. And so when John flips back over and we take a look at our new software implementation project that came over from Jira, you see the swim lanes made their way over, and the individual tasks themselves. John hovers over a task, you can see the start date, the finish date. All of the information that I entered in Jira is going to come over as well. What a lot of people will say to us is, that's great that you bring start date and finish date and the duration in, but there are entities within Jira that we collect that you may not collect in a portfolio project management tool. It's like, okay, so what we've done is we've created a register for our Jira integration, and any of you that are familiar with registers know one of the key value propositions there is it allows us to collect any information that we want. And so what we've done here is created a register for our Jira integration. And so if there are metrics in Jira that you want to bring in and begin to report on in Cora, that register is going to be a nice place to put those, triage those, and if you want to create graphs and reports around number of issues opened, closed, resources that are assigned to that information, that register is a great place to collect that. So it doesn't just have to appear in the Cora Gantt view or the Kanban view. It actually can be brought in as a register entity, and we can do even additional reporting based on that. So hopefully that gives you a feel for what we can do with Jira from an integration standpoint. I think we are successful, and our adoption is always better when we can successfully integrate Cora with other line of business systems. And sometimes those systems are very sophisticated, like whether it's financials or sometimes HR, but sometimes it's very tactical business systems that make a huge difference in adoption. And Jira is one of those where if we can help build a bridge between the traditional team, the Jira team, we see Cora, the adoption level of Cora being much higher and users ultimately being much happier. So those are my three, and I appreciate your time very much.